I'm Anthony Delcall, writer and creator of Romeo vs. Juliet, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Anthony Del Cole as he talks about his future plans, including a return to Shakespeare and graphic novels. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button to be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Originally from Canada but currently residing in New York City, Anthony Del Cole is a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer-producer of podcasts and comics. His stories include Kill Shakespeare, Assassin's Creed, the controversial graphic novel The Death of Nancy Drew, and the award-winning insider comic I Escaped a Chinese Internment Camp, a first-person exploration of one Muslim Uyghur's woman's imprisonment by the Chinese government. It was a 2022 Pulitzer Award-winning book for illustrated reporting and commentary. His 2020 audio drama Assassin's Creed Gold, starring Oscar nominee Riz Ahmed, was Audible's top-rated release of the year. His first project with Audible, the found-footage thriller Unheard, the story of Anna Wislow, hit #1 on Audible and broke download records. Other projects include the Ringo Awards-nominated graphic novel Son of Hitler, Luke Cage Everyman, 3 seasons of Wondery's hit podcast Against the Odds, over 50 episodes of the Army Matters podcast, and a series of acclaimed and award-winning comics for Insider that explore subjects such as anti-Muslim policies in India, filtration camps in Ukraine, and migrant workers in Qatar. His forthcoming work, planned for April 2025, is Romeo vs. Juliet. The story of Romeo vs. Juliet goes like this. In the Shakespearean Western, warrior for hire and pregnant, Juliet Capulet is hired to protect a border town nunnery from the evil forces led by her ex, Romeo. As they prepare, she reluctantly reunites with her old allies, including Hamlet, Othello, Puck, a magnificent Shakespeare 7. But they soon discover something rotten in the state of the nunnery and a magical force that dreams are made on, all while Juliet must determine if the father of her child is Hamlet or the man she must kill, Romeo. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Anthony Del Cole as he talks about his future plans, including a return to Shakespeare and graphic novels.
So, Anthony Del Cole, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
No, thanks for having me on the show, John. I'm excited to chat.
I appreciate your time. Before I get going with all the questions, though, I would like to know, what are you reading today? What's on your bedside reading table?
Oh, I didn't do my homework. I should have this answer prepared. My reading table on the bedside is, other than children's books, because I have 2 toddlers, ages 3 and 5, so I spend most of my time reading books for them. In comics, finally getting into volume 2 of Human Target, the Tom King, and oh my God, why am I blanking on the name of the artist right now? I feel embarrassed about that. Finally get into that. As we know, Tom King is one of the greatest writers in comics today. I love his Love Everlasting series, and I love the first volume of Human Target, so I'm excited to get into that. I think I just read the first chapter last night of that. My favorite writer in comics today is Ed Brubaker, so I have his Friday series. It's like a detective story told from the perspective of teenagers, and not like Nancy Drew Hardy boys, but even younger. And I mean, Brubaker can do no wrong in my eyes. I think he's the peak of comic book writing today. And so, yeah, I'm excited to get into that. And I just finished G. Willow Wilson's, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the artist, the Poison Ivy series that they did. I think that came out last year. I just finished reading that a week and a half ago, which I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, lots of good stuff. I got to ask you, though, you mentioned that you've got toddlers there at home and you're reading children's books. I do hear about some creators that make the move over to younger book creation. Does that ever give you a thought like, gosh, maybe I could get into this market as well and write for younger readers? Does that ever cross your mind?
It does every time I read these stories, and I'm like, I could probably do this. But then when I actually sit down and I do brainstorming on various stories and whatnot, my mind drifts towards death and
Okay.
mayhem and love triangles. And that sort of thing. So I don't know if that tells you more about me or more about my creative interests.
That's a fair
But yeah,
answer.
I mean,
Sure.
I've got one or two nuggets of ideas that I'd like to do for children's stories, but no, most of the stuff I'm doing these days are more adults. And when I say
Yeah.
adult, I don't mean like
Yeah.
Cinemax.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Now, we haven't spoken, believe it or not, in almost 4 years, but we did run into each other very briefly at New York Comic Con. Great to see you there. So I got to ask you, how was that show for you? Was it everything you thought it would be?
Everything and more. New York Comic Con is it's my favorite show in the world for a number of reasons. One, I now live in New York or Brooklyn, so it's my hometown show at the moment, and it's nice to be able to go to a show over the course of the day and come back and sleep in your own bed. As opposed to most other shows where you're going to a hotel room or whatnot, and just it's just not the same. I get to see my children. Also has a special place in my heart because that's where we first sold Kill Shakespeare, my first comic book series I ever did, and that was with Conor McCreary and Andy Belanger, other Canadians. Where we went to New York Comic Con in February of 2009. That's when the show used to be in this winter/spring. All we had was a little pitch package, character designs, that sort of thing. We had one meeting set up in advance, and we just walked around the floors and talked to the various comic book companies. And by the end of the weekend, we had 2 offers on the table. And then within a week, we had another 2 offers. And so, yeah, it holds a very special place in my heart. And also, it's New York Comic Con always treats me well. New York has a very literary/literate audience. There's a lot of Kill Shakespeare fans. There's a lot of fans of my work, a lot of fans of the nonfiction work that I've done with Business Insider. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very friendly place, and it's big. And the other great thing is I get to run into people like you. I get to run into other Canadians. I
Yeah.
get to run into friends I haven't seen for years. It's for all of the above. It's an amazing show.
That's the best part for sure. Now, at that event, you were talking about something related to a Kill Shakespeare adventure, and that was Romeo versus Juliet. And I think, if I remember correctly, you had a Free Comic Book Day issue there. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the story, maybe a little bit more about what's coming down the road.
Sure. I mean, I'll take a step back even further. So, Kill Shakespeare is coming back. For those that are not familiar with Kill Shakespeare, action adventure series where you take all of Shakespeare's greatest heroes and villains, we put them all together. It was first published by IDW back in 2010, which is, oh wow, I can't believe it's been almost 15 years now.
Yeah.
It was quite the ride with IDW. With them, we published 5 volumes, one omnibus. We also licensed it out for board game through IDW Games. We did an audio drama with Audible Germany, of all places, not Audible US or Canada or the UK, but Audible in the German language for some reason. We have a stage show for Kill Shakespeare that's played all over from it debuted at Soul Pepper Theater Company back in 2012, I think it was, and then it's now toured all over the world, everywhere from Toronto and New York to Dubai and London at the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. And then we, of course, went through Development Hill and back with television. But then about 2.5 years ago, my co-creator Conor McCreary and I were able to wrestle back the rights to Kill Shakespeare in every medium. So we're talking comics, games, audio, film and TV, everything. So we're able to get those rights back. I won't bore you with all the details. It was a legal nightmare. We were able to come out on the other end unscathed, relatively.
Well, congratulations on that.
A bunch of cuts and bruises, but we were able to get everything right. And then we sat back and said, well, we own the rights. What do we want to do again? And so I had this germ of an idea, an image of sometimes the stories I have. They always start with an image. Like when I wrote Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, The Big Lie, or The Death of Nancy Drew, I had an image of Frank and Joe Hardy in interrogation rooms by the police, and they're being investigated for the murder of their father, and then eventually they have to track down a femme fatale, Nancy Drew. It's that image. And so in this case, I had an image of a high noon Western style showdown, Romeo on one side, Juliet on the other side, the world's two greatest lovers, now two great foes battling it out to the death. And that image just stuck in my mind for a few months. And then that's when I realized that, okay, well, this is the story I need to tell. And that became Romeo versus Juliet, which is, as I said, it's a Shakespeare Western. Juliet has to protect a border town nunnery from invading forces, which include her ex, Romeo Montague. And so in order to protect the village, the nunnery, she has to turn to her old adversaries, Hamlet, Othello, Puck, and others. So it's our own little Magnificent Shakespeare 7, if you will. Romeo and Juliet, I know. I love that cross. It's every time I say, it's a Magnificent Shakespeare 7, people, they just start to laugh in a good way, not at me, but they laugh with me. Yes, of course.
Right.
Yes, right, John? Yeah. That's what you were doing.
I can picture it. It's
okay,
great.
good.
Yeah.
It's a really cool concept. I hope I don't sound pretentious when I say I'm kind of picturing it's a remix of Kill Shakespeare and Shakespeare itself. So Kill Shakespeare was always a remix. We took all of his characters, mashed them all together and created a whole new story. In this one, we were mashing up Shakespeare's characters, but we're also mashing up the previous incarnations of Kill Shakespeare. So if you have read the first 5 volumes or even the first 2 volumes of Kill Shakespeare, you'll be able to get into this. If you haven't read Kill Shakespeare, you can get into this. If you've read Romeo and Juliet in class or seen it performed anywhere in the world, you can get into this. If you've never seen or couldn't stand Romeo and Juliet in class or on stage or in film or whatnot, you'll still be able to get into this. Everybody knows the story of the two star-crossed lovers, and I guess you could picture it as sort of a sequel, like what would happen to them, if they both survived. What would happen? And in this version, they fight to the death.
Wow, that is something else. Now, I was saying there that you've got a sort of a tease that was going on at New York Comic Con, but the actual book doesn't come out till sometime later, right? Is that the way things are going?
That's correct. So we put out the very first chapter of Romeo versus Juliet. And by the way, I should probably mention the artist is Stefan Toshev, another Canadian creator, Canadian artist. I think you should definitely have him on the show. He's done some really cool work in the past. Very good friend of mine, Keith Morris, who's sort of my artist whisperer or guru. I always go to him like, hey, can you find me an artist with this sort of style or something? He's like, oh, you got to go see Stefan. Based in Vancouver. He plays rock and roll and punk when he's not drawing art. Amazing guy. But yes, we put out the first chapter of Romeo versus Juliet and back in Free Comic Book Day in May of this year. And the intention was to release the full graphic novel in November. However, about a month and a half ago, we put the brakes on for 2 reasons. One is we had some printing problems. As you know, printers are still in a state of flux after the pandemic. And things are mostly righted, but in their case, it just wasn't. Yeah, they missed some deadlines, and so we realized that it would come out a little bit late. So we said, look, if we're going to put it out late, let's put it out next year. And in fact, if we want to do it next year, let's do it. Let's release it on April 22nd. And the significance of April 22nd is that on April 23rd is World Shakespeare Day. So Shakespeare was born on April 23rd and he died on April 23rd. How poetic is that? I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why it's World Shakespeare Day. So bookstores around the world put on little events or they do little promotions or and stuff like that. So we figured, hey, if we put a book out on that day or that very week, maybe it'll get picked up by a lot more bookstores. Because one of the things we found with Kill Shakespeare was the direct market, the comic book shops. Kill Shakespeare's done well there, but the real bread and butter for the series are the indie bookstores, ones that have where there's a lot of, say, theater kids, theater people that go. Like that's sort of the number one sales spot for Kill Shakespeare. So we're really leaning heavily into the indie bookstore release this year or this time.
Right. Now, when I was looking online for the book, it actually said pre-order because as you mentioned, it's coming out in April. What is the significance of pre-order? Why does it matter so much?
I'm sure there's people that are far more knowledgeable about this than I am, because the main reason is that when you pre-order a book, it helps out with the algorithms. It shows that there's demand or there's interest in it, and so not only will the people that are buying it, so if you're going to pre-order it from Chapters Indigo, if you're going to pre-order from Amazon, from Barnes & Noble, from Waterstones in the UK, wherever it is, the people that are behind the scenes, they will look at it and be like, oh, wow, there's already some pre-orders. There's interest in it in advance. Maybe we should increase our stock and increase our purchase of it or inventory. And in the days of algorithms, as we all know everything in the algorithm these days. And so if there's, the more pre-sales there are, the more algorithms will then kick it out to other potential buyers. Like, hey, this person likes Sandman by Neil Gaiman or any other books by Neil Gaiman or Fables or whatever else. Hey, they might like this Kill Shakespeare series, which is actually pre-selling quite well. So it makes a huge difference. I've also heard the opposite, that the better thing to do is and I'm not, please, if you're interested in Romeo versus Juliet or Kill Shakespeare, and specifically if you're interested in Romeo versus Juliet, go out and pre-order it. But I have heard from some indie authors that it's actually better to put it for people to buy on the first couple of days of release. Now, I don't have the numbers behind that, but this is some of the stuff I've read, and a couple authors have told me that it's actually better to once the book's out, because that's when the algorithms really kick in. Like you want a lot of sales in that first week or two, because that's when Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Chapters Indigo, like all the online stores will kind of look at it, and the algorithms will kick in to an even greater degree.
Right. Okay. That's fair enough. Sure. Now, it's not often I get to interview a Pulitzer Prize winner. And that's what you are. So I wanted to ask you a bit about what does that feel like to achieve that honor?
Um, I had in when I was young, I always thought, hey, it'd be cool to win this. Like, it'd be cool to win an Oscar or an Emmy or Nobel Prize or something like that. Never for the life of me did I ever think about, did I ever consider aiming for or that I would win a Pulitzer Prize. And even when when I started to work in the field of journalism with Business Insider, well, Insider at the time, now Business Insider again. Um, I was like, well, they would never give one because there's only one comic creator that's ever won a Pulitzer Prize, and that was Art Spiegelman. And they gave it to him because he's Art Spiegelman and he created Mouse, and that was a special Pulitzer. Um, so I had no thought, no dream really that we'd ever win one. And then the day that they announced this, oh sorry, I should probably preface this by saying, yeah, I'm myself and my team, Famida Azim, who's actually it's her birthday today, so I need to reach out to her. Josh Adams, the son of Neil Adams, of course, and then Walt Hickey. We won a Pulitzer Prize in 2022 in the illustrated reporting and commentary category for I Escaped a Chinese Internment Camp. It's one woman's it illustrates or it's a story of one woman's ordeal as she goes through the re-education camp system in the Xinjiang region in China. There's a genocide happening in that area. A lot of people in the world are not familiar with it. Anywhere from 1 to 3 million people are being imprisoned, tortured, beaten, brainwashed, or killed by the Chinese authorities. And like I said, there's just not a lot of people that are aware of this. And so we put out a story telling Zomrat's tale. And it had a very good readership on Business Insider. It was our first quote unquote really serious story. And then a few months later we won the Pulitzer for it. So how did it feel? I did not think that we would ever win it. It was amazing. It's something I can put in my bio at the very beginning of my bio for the rest of my life. But to me, and I know this sounds cliche, but it's not. The best thing about it was it led to more people reading the story.
Well,
And
it's a nice thing to have under your belt, though. That's for sure.
It's very nice. But what's nice is that it has shone. I never know because I think in the States they say shined and I say can't remember. It's put a spotlight on this for, so I mean, I know there are thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that have read this that may not have been exposed to this before, and now they have a better idea of what's happening. Because it's a travesty. It's a tragedy what's happening. And I wish more people knew.
And that's one of the great things about creating comic books and graphic novels. They can draw people in and raise issues that people normally might not even consider.
Yeah.
Right? So
what really appealed to us about this story and a lot of the stuff that we've done with the Business Insider is the fact that there are no photos. There are no videos of what these re-education camps look like because the Chinese authorities will never allow that. And it's rare for someone to be able to get out. Zomrat and she admits that she's one of the lucky few that was able to get out. She was lucky that her husband was originally from Pakistan. He was able to pull some connections, get her out of the re-education camp after 63 days, I think it was. And then they were able to go and travel to Pakistan. And during that trip, they then fled to the U.S. And there's a happy ending, in her story in that she and her 3 children and her husband they're alive. They're thriving in the United States. They just bought their first home a year ago. But I mean, she's dealing with a lot of trauma. The Chinese authorities still threaten her. They've killed her father. They have beaten or they have gotten through to her siblings who will not talk to her. She still receives death threats all the time. She receives other all kinds of other violent threats towards her because she's speaking out about what's happening. And one of the more interesting things is that when I attended the American Library Association show in San Diego back at this summer, there was actually a Chinese publisher. I don't know if I should be telling the story. You have a scoop on the show. There was a Chinese publisher that was Chinese propaganda. How Xi Jinping is the greatest. There are all these books about how great Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party and the Republic of China, how great he is and that sort of thing. So I went up to them. I said, "Hey, I won the Pulitzer for this a year and a half ago. This book just came out a few months ago. I'd like to give it to you." And there's 2 women that were there. They looked at it "Oh, that's interesting." Is this happening in China? I was like, "Yes, it's happening in China." They played dumb. They may not have been aware of it, or they just were in denial. And then third person, this older man, I gave him a copy of the book. I was like, "Hey, would you like me to sign this for it?" He looks at the book. He's like, He stands up. "This is a lie. This is no. She was a reason. There's a reason she was in prison. She was a criminal. All these people are criminals. I go to that area. There are no camps like this." And yeah, there's just even Chinese, even individuals that like from Chinese printing or publishing companies, they're either in denial, or they're scared. They're too scared to admit what's actually happening in the country.
Wow, pretty serious issue, that's for sure. That's for sure. Now, speaking of serious, we haven't had the opportunity to chat about AI, which has been all over the news, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it, about AI use in comic book creation. What are you thinking about these days?
I think Adobe Illustrator is amazing. No, I'm just kidding. It took me a while because for years AI was always Adobe Illustrator. No, AI. What are my thoughts on it? I mean, I've seen the art. It's not. There will be people that will try to use it to replace artists. There will be people who try to use it to replace writers and creators. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think a lot of the stuff is even 5, 10, 25 years from now, it's going to be all, there's nothing original that's going to come out of it. It's all going to be standard place. It's going to be cliches. It's going to be tropes. It's going to be stuff you've already seen. And the stuff that's different in it just won't make any sense. However, I think AI can be used to complement or to assist in the process. I mean, people in the animation industry already use AI to say generate like bigger crowds and audiences and that sort of thing in like animated films or TV or film or something like that. So I mean, in the comic space, I think it'd be used as a tool to assist artists and assist writers, but it's never going to fully replace them. Am I scared? No, I don't lose any sleep at night, but it's not something that I'm completely friendly towards.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Good insight. That's for sure. Well, Anthony, those are really all the questions I have for you. But I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Well, I mentioned that. I mean, I'm in New York, but first of all, I'm still Canadian. I don't know if you've recognized the accent. I still have some maple syrup in my blood. I'm a proud
Sure.
Canadian. We're a very proud group here in Toronto, or sorry, in New York, and then in the U.S. Every time we run into other Canadians, we give ourselves big hugs and we say A's and stuff like that. No, the one thing that I'd love to chat about, it's not really comics. But I mean, I do comics. Romeo vs. Juliet comes in April. Kill Shakespeare First Folio, I think I neglected to mention that's on me, which was, like I said, we got all publishing rights back. We signed a deal with Gemstone late last year. And so back in October, we released Kill Shakespeare First Folio, which collects the original first 2 volumes of Kill Shakespeare all in one book. It's an amazing cover by Richard Isanove, who did some of the classic Wolverine covers with Joe Quesada and a bunch of others. Amazing colorist and artist. He did Marvel 1602 as well, which is one of the things that popped in my mind. But yeah, so it's amazing. I'm really happy with it. We're going to come out in September of next year with Kill Shakespeare Second Folio, which collects the previous volumes 3 through 5, Romeo vs. Juliet. And then outside of comics, I'd love to give a little plug for an audio thriller that I wrote. It's going to be released through BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds on December 27th. It'll be available, all 5 episodes. I will tell you the title of it is Don't Listen to This, and it's a thriller set in the world of esports. I can't tell you anything other than that. I was in London last month for a week during production. We have an amazing cast, and I just had the time of my life there, just working with the actors, working with the directors and the producers and the team at BBC. I'm really proud of this. I have done a number of audio dramas in the past. I did Assassin's Creed Origins, which is a spinoff of obviously Assassin's Creed. I've done some found footage thriller with Audible and a number of other stories, but I'm super proud of this one. And if you know anything about esports, you're going to love it. If you know anything about just thrillers, I think you're going to love it. I'm obsessed with fiction podcasts and audio dramas like this. Back when I was a kid growing up in Timmins, Ontario, for some reason, my local radio station on Sunday mornings would broadcast the old classic radio serials and dramas from the 40s and 50s, like The Shadow and The Lone Ranger and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And here we are X number of years later, and I get to write this kind of stuff. So I'm quite excited about this. Will there be a comic book adaptation of it? Maybe. But right now, I'm just focused on getting the series done and getting it out there next month.
Thanks to Anthony for taking time to chat with me. You can discover more about Anthony online at anthonydelcole.com. and on Instagram at instagram.com/AnthonyDelCole. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along at True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you can send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2024.